Hey crafters, welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to crochet a ribbed beanie. So let's grab our yarn and our hook and head to the crafting table. So in today's video, you're going to use some yarn, and the yarn I'm using today is by Loops and Thread. It is their Charisma yarn, and the color for today is mustard. So if you're interested in that, there will be a link to this yarn down in the description. But you're also going to need a pair of scissors, a size L hook because this is bulky yarn, and you're also going to need a darning needle. If you have one with a larger eye, that'll probably work better because this yarn is kind of thick. But all right, so let's get to making the hat. To start, you're going to need to chain 32 stitches. You don't need to leave a super long yarn tail, but you can if you want to for the sewing. But for this project, I'm not going to leave a long yarn tail in, but you can. So let's get our 32 chains. All right, now we have our 32 chains. So for this hat, we are going to be using the half double crochet stitch. So remember, with our half double crochet, we are going to skip the first two stitches, and then we're going to half double crochet into the third stitch. If you don't know how to half double crochet, I encourage you to pause the video and go watch my tutorial on how to half double crochet and then come back and work on this hat. So we are going to half double crochet down the rest of the row. So turn over, insert our hook into the third chain from the hook, and we're just going to half double crochet down. Now remember, with half double crochet, the turning chain counts as a stitch. So remember that when we come back for our stitch count. And so we are just going to half double crochet down the work. All right, so that is our first row of half double crochet. You should end with 31 stitches. Remember, the turning chain counts as a stitch. So now we're going to continue on to row number 2. So we're going to chain 2, and then we're going to turn our work, and we're going to half double crochet across the rest of the row. But for this one, we are going to half double crochet in the back loops of the stitch for the remaining of the project. So you are going to put your hook into the first stitch underneath the turning chain, and we are going to half double crochet in the back loops of the previous stitches. And you're going to continue that all the way down the row. So if you don't know how to crochet in the back loop, I also have a tutorial on that. So you can click the link and check that out. So you can learn how to so you can learn how to crochet in the back row. This is what gives your work, your hat, that ribbed look to it. And it also allows the hat to give it a little bit of stretch so that you don't have to make the hat so big. And I don't think I said this in the opening, but you are going to need 2 balls of yarn for this project. So I'm going to continue crocheting in the back row. When I finish this first ball of yarn, I will come back and show you guys how many rows you should end up with and what your work will look like once you hit row 26. All right, so at this point, you have finished your first ball of yarn. And so this is what your work should look like. It should have these nice ridges on them. This is the other side looks like. So it should have these nice ridges. And so we are not done yet. Like I said, you're going to need a second row. At this point, you should have roughly 26 rows. And one way, easy way to count the rows is to count the number of ridges you have in the work and just count by two. So we go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26. And so now we're at row 27. So you'll have about 26, 27 rows. It just really depends on how tightly or how loosely you crochet. And so now I am going to continue on with the last little bit of yarn that we have here. And then I'm going to show you how to connect your new yarn so that we can continue on to the next couple of rows, because we are going to need, this is going to, when we fold this in half, this is going to be too big for an adult head. It may be big enough for a child, but it's going to be too small for an adult head. So we are going to need to continue on to the rows. So okay. So now I'm going to show you how to attach the new yarn once I finish with this last tail piece. I'm going to show you how to attach the new yarn so that we can continue on with our row. So give me a second, I'll be right back. All right, so now we've come to the end of our yarn. So what you can do is you can undo that. I'll undo that last one. So you can either take the new yarn and just tie them both together and make a knot. And then after you make that knot, you can just continue on and come back and just cut the tails of the knot if you want to. You can also do what is called a Russian joint. So you will take one part of the yarn and you're going to tie a knot with the first tail around the tail of the new yarn and tighten it. Then you're going to take the new yarn and tie a knot on the tail of the old yarn. And you can do this with any crochet project, especially if you want to kind of make your everything seamless. And then you're going to pull until both knots reach each other. I'm going to pull tightly. And then you're just going to use your scissors. And you're going to cut off those tail pieces. And so now you have a nice kind of seamless join to your work. And now you can continue crocheting your work. And I'll show you what that looks like. Get closer so you see the knot coming up. So it just becomes part of the work. And now you can't even see where that knot is. Your new color, well, if you're using a new color, but your new yarn is securely set and you don't have to worry about it coming undone or unraveling at all when you use that technique. I believe it's called the Russian join to connect two pieces of yarn together. It also saves you from having to weave in yarn tails or having really like big knots in your work. That one looked really big because this is a bulky yarn, so it looked a little bigger than it should have. But you can use the Russian join to connect new yarn together, or if you're doing a color change, you can use that as well. We're going to continue on until we hit row 33, and then I will come back. You guys can see the whole thing. So we have completed row 33. Now, 33 rows should be enough for an adult hat. This is usually what I use. One thing you can do to check is to take a piece of yarn, especially if you're making it for yourself, and wrap it around your head. That'll give you the circumference, and then just kind of measure from the end to end where it stops at. Now, this is a little short, but remember, this yarn is also pretty stretchy. So when I place this on my head, the yarn is going to stretch. So it doesn't need to be exact. As a matter of fact, I would not recommend that you crochet all the way out to the end of the circumference of your yarn that you use to check the width, um, and actually leave it about an inch to an inch and a half shorter than that, because like I said, the yarn is stretchy, so it's going to stretch when you put on the hat. Now that we have our 33 rows and we are done with that, we are going to begin putting our hat together. If you watch my tutorial on how to make a crochet pumpkin, then you should be very familiar with this process. So what you're going to need is a tail of yarn that is 3 times the length, at least 3 times the length of your hat when it's folded. So you're going to go 1, 2, and down one more time. That'll give us 3 times the length of the hat. If you still want to be super cautious, you can still make it even longer, but we don't really need it as long as we would have for the pumpkin, because the pumpkin we have to close up both sides. With this, we're only closing up the one. So you're going to pull your yarn through that last stitch. And now what we're going to do is we are going to sew these edges closed. And how we're going to do that is you're going to take the back loop of this stitch and connect it to the front loop of the next stitch. And then we're going to weave it. But it actually went through. So if you have this bulky yarn in a regular size needle, it will fit. You just have to be careful that you don't mess anything up. So we are going to continue to crochet this close. So now we want to go into the second one, back to the first, and we're just going to, like I said, continue that. We're going to come back, third stitch, third, the front of the third stitch on this side. And we're just going to make our way down the work. Now you should have, remember we had 31 stitches. So same thing with this, because we're trying to match it up. You should have 31 stitches going down. Make sure you're holding your work even, because it can become uneven if you're not holding it, and especially if you're not paying super close attention to the making sure that you're going in through the correct stitches. It can kind of start shifting and looking a little wonky, which I do sometimes when I'm just kind of over doing this and I'm just ready to get it done. So I'm going to continue stitching down the sides of my work, and when I'm done, I'll be back to show you how your seam should look. All right, now we have made it to the end of our hat. So we're just going to do this last piece. We made it to the end of the hat. So now we have to close the top of the hat. So closing the top of the hat is a little bit differently. We are going to cinch the top of the hat closed. So how we do that is you are just going to run your hook in and out, or you are going to run your needle in and out of your stitches around the edge. And so, especially if you have like little big gaps like this, that'll be a nice place to put it so that you can pull the thread through. And don't worry about it looking too short because, like I said, we are going to cinch this closed, which means we're going to pull this tight and we're going to close it up. So it doesn't matter if it starts looking like, oh no, I'm going to run out of yarn or whatever the case may be. See how I pulled that and it starts pulling it closed? So it doesn't matter if you feel like it's going to be short because it's not. We're going to end up having enough yarn to close your work. And make sure you try to keep your cinch stitch level. So, you don't want to go all the way down here and then come up here. You want to make sure you kind of stay even around the top so that when we start pulling it closed, it closes evenly and it doesn't um, make these weird puckers in your hat because you ended up, pulling it down too far or whatever the case may be. So we're almost back around to our seam, which if you did it really well, you can barely tell that there's a seam there, but we're almost back to the beginning of our seam. So we're going to continue to work around the hat. And one of these days, I'll get to making a video where you create the hat in the round. But for beginners, this tends to be the easiest way for them to learn how to make a hat, especially if you don't know what I'm talking about. And you're like, what in the world is a round? Then it's easier to teach you how to do it this way. And also, if you're going to sew in a pom-pom or something like that into the top, which we're not doing in this video, it also is a little bit easier this way. All right, so we've made it back to the beginning. So now all you're going to do is begin to pull the top close. And as you can see, it is closing up at the top. And now what you will notice is that there is a small hole here. So we could easily go in and close in that hole and just kind of find some loops to pull your thread through because we want to close that hole up. We don't want it to be there. Like I said, if you were doing a pom pom or something like that, then you could, just stick the pom pom on top and no one would ever notice it. Just want to make sure that we are firmly feeling the hole. And you actually could just run it back around again to create another cinch if you wanted to. But this tends to work out and just pull it super tight. So now, as you can see, we closed up that hole in the top. Now we need to kind of hide our yarn because we're not going to need this yarn tail anymore. And so what I'd like to do is I just like to kind of weave in yarn tail in a couple of different places at the top because no one's really looking at the top of the hat. So you want to weave it in, do that. So remember when we're weaving in our work, we always want to make sure that we go in one way, go back through the opposite way, not necessarily through the same stitches, but that we just reverse course, go back through the work, and that'll help kind of lock it down. And if you want to, you can run it down over here on the side because it's all one color, so no one's going to see that into there. Make a little knot. And then when you cut it, you can stick your yarn to the inside of the hat, and pull it through, and then we are going to kind of flip that out a little bit. And we're going to clip our yarn tail. And so now that is nice and secure. And the only other thing that we need to do is to hide this yarn tail, which is pretty simple. Now we could have wove this yarn tail in at the bottom, especially since we weren't going to use it to sew the work, which is why I said at the beginning, you can either leave a super long one, or you can, just leave it in at the end, which is what we're going to do is just leave it in. But if you decide to do the hat again, then what I would suggest is to just go ahead and carry it with the rest of the work so that you don't have to come back and do this and you'll be done with your project. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to leave our yarn in. You don't want to make it too obvious So just find a few stitches to weave your bottom yarn into, go back in another time, going the opposite way, and you kind of close up this little gap in here, make that a little, make the presentation for that a little better. And obviously, if you were selling pets, you could take your little label or whatever and put it in this spot, and so no one would, ever see it after you do it. But I'm making this as a Christmas gift, so I'm try to hide it just a little bit, tighten that up. All right, so now we have finished our crochet hat. So lift the edge up, and this is a nice thick hat. It's a nice warm hat. As I told you guys, it will stretch. So if you're worried about it being too small, um, it will stretch out when the person puts it on their head, and it'll keep them nice and toasty. I hope you enjoyed learning how to crochet this rib beanie today. If you make any of these beanies, please make sure to tag me on Facebook. I'd love to see what you guys have created. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Keep crafting, and I'll see you in the next video.